Welcome to Sewing Bee from History, where I take a sewing bee challenge and link it to the past. I'm Sandy from I Love History, I love sewing, I love knitting, and as a 1940s reenactor, I decided to make some sewing bee items based on historical fashion. I'm disabled with fibromyalgia, so I spend a lot of time having to work from bed or finding shortcuts because I'm in a lot of pain and have a lot of fatigue as well. So this is a sewing project you could also do with limited mobility and limited materials and resources really as well. So season 8 episode 1 of Sewing Bee saw a wrap dress challenge. So this is my 1940s style wrap dress, which has got some gathers at the side, minimal waste of the fabric, and follows all the utility regulations details. So women went into the factories, wrap over aprons and house dresses protected their clothes, or were great to wear as a uniform to protect them and to lengthen the life of the clothes they'd already got. These pictures here show ladies in Redditch, popular fashion choice to have the flowery dresses or the plain ones, bit of everything really. You can't see anything else being worn on those photos really. They were obviously sensible, young and old, whichever shape you were. So in the home they were just as useful to protect their clothing, could be made from scraps of fabric and worn over the clothing to do housework, etc. And as a reenactor, I love them because they can make me look period appropriate straight away, just and simplest of hairdos, and I haven't got to try too hard. So for this wrap dress, I've taken some linen that I'd got and folded it the width of the fabric in half to make the dress shape, and I've then basically cut a hole in the top and cut it up the front and cut the arms into it. I've used the idea of the 1 hour dress that you see online quite often, so I'll sort of go through it in a bit more detail here. So I've taken the fabric, it's about 4 meters I had, and folded it in half, so against the width, which would be about 58 inches I think on mine, and that width is your shoulder to shoulder across the top, and the length how you want it to be, down to just under your knee to be period appropriate length. You then basically cut a hole for your head in the middle and cut a line down the front, which is going to be your opening. So whilst I had 4 meters, I don't think I used the full 4 meters to be honest. So anyway, folded it in half from below my knee up to my shoulders, cut the neck hole, I cut a semicircle so you end up with a circle, and then the line straight down the middle to make the front. I then tried it on once it was cut, and put my arms out either side, and got my son to help me sort of mark where my arms were basically on there. So I'm stood there in the garden with my head sticking out through this piece of fabric, and he's helped me with got the pair of scissors, and he's cut from sort of the fabric was sort of sitting just below my elbows, so we've cut down about 1 inch below my arms and into my waist. With me, to be honest, I'm pretty much short and round, so it's a square piece of fabric with me. And so then once that piece is cut in, you sort of cut down slightly to basically where your hips are. Again, with me, I haven't got much space between underneath my boobs and my hips, so it's just a small cut. And then once you've done that, hem it really neatly. And what I love about linen is it's so lovely to sew. You can just pick up and do lovely neat hems, and this has also got lines in it, so it looked particularly neat. I was fascinated with it. So a nice hem across each side of the opening to the dress. You then do underneath the arms. So for this, I've actually done a French seam on it, and then I've done the gathers into the side. Folded it all the way, and then a hem again. It's just very, very simple, folded over, trusting my sewing to make it straight rather than trusting the fabric or the cuts really. And what I have done, because of the way it flops open, I decided a collar would fit there quite nicely as well. So I've left the neck at the moment blank so that I could sew a collar onto it. So that T shape is coming in, your arms are showing, you've got basically a T-shirt happening with a line, a seam coming down from underneath your arm to your hips, and then the hip pieces are gathered into like a T shape into the seam. So the seam, what I did was I'd run a gather stitch through those extra bits at the side. For me, it's quite chunky, so it makes it quite a full skirt, but there might not be that many, depends on how wide your fabric is. And then, so this is the 1 hour dress pattern that I found online, and if you Google that, you see so many different ones. It's actually more of a 1920s style, but it shows you how to gather and sew into the seam on those patterns if you get stuck. Into a T-shape, sewing it up. The main thing to remember is that because it's a wrap over dress, one of the sides, for me it's my right side, needs to be left open so that you can put a tie through it. Once you've done that, I did it roughly first and then neatened it up so that it looked all together, made a bit of a nicer job of it. So my main thing is because I don't use patterns very often, and I don't quite often measure things when it comes to sewing. I do with the knitwear is accurate, but my sewing I only do for me. I don't sell my sewing, so I just wing it until it fits, really. So then neatened it all up, did my hem. This is showing how I did the hems, really. Folded them over and then just picked up one single thread, or maybe two sometimes, of the linen, and I've done that down the fronts, on the sleeves and across the bottom. The seams I've done by doing a running stitch through and then double folding it back on itself and sewing in like that on the inside. So then on the outside you end up with a really lovely neat finish. On the inside it's less neat, and again, because I don't sew it, I don't always finish it off very neat on the inside. It all depends on what I'm doing with it. This is only a one-off dress, so it didn't need to be too robust. I did make sure the gathers were all sewn in tightly, got rid of that raw edge, and then neatened up everywhere as I went, really. It's just showing the seams there. With the linen, because of the way the threads run on it, it's quite easy to do it blind, just picking up very, very discreetly. And I hand sew everything. I've tried sewing with a machine, I never get very far. That's how I finished the hole where the belt needs to go through. Again, as neat as I can, all within reason. Neat as I can. That's under my arms, you don't see it. It's okay. It's difficult to do because there was a lot of fabric to fit into one space there. You might want to actually properly pleat it, or gather it much tighter. It's up to you, really. The whole thing with this is that it's great for somebody who hasn't got a pattern for it, doesn't really know where to start. I don't use very specialist equipment at all. This is how I measured it. So I got a piece of wool and measured from my shoulders down to just below my knees where I wanted the dress to be, and I used that piece of wool to then go around the edge to make sure it was the right length. I then did just double check with the tape measure that I'd got the hem right, and it worked. It's a way of working, especially when you've got the gathers making things sort of separate and different. I cut some pockets. I didn't actually end up sewing them on particularly neat. I also used the offcuts to cut off two belts for it. My way of sewing the belt was to use a thick knitting needle and sew the belt around it. That then meant I didn't have to measure to make sure it was the right width, because it went down the width of the needle, and I then turned it inside out. The belt then sews on the flap in line with where the gathers are, so that one can tuck in through the hole and the other one wraps around the outside. They can tie behind your back. So this is the end result at Redditch Needle Museum's 1940s day. It covered my clothes up, it looked like a wrap apron, it did the overall job that I wanted it to do, felt comfortable, fitted okay. It's not done up there, it's just wrapped around my back. But yeah, next time I probably wouldn't bother with a pocket. But it's done the job. It was a very, very quick sew, probably only took an hour or two. And yeah, recommended, nice, easy way of making a wrap over. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else you want me to do. I'm trying to get these videos done as I can, and thank you for watching.